Good morning. This morning, I want to share with you, with her permission, an email that Emily sent me last week that inspired my talk. And she wrote this following my talk on wisdom. And she said, quote, I spent a summer in India and recall a day where I joined a meditation group, which was on top of a building outside. It was extremely hot and there were so many flies. I was so uncomfortable and frankly got nothing out of it at the time. A couple that was doing it with me had an opposite experience of feeling so rested and peaceful. I remember thinking, how in the world could they have felt restful from this? The teacher spoke about striving for the ability to meditate anywhere and under any conditions. What is your take on that goal? End quote. And Emily's email really got me thinking a little more broadly about why I practice and teach what I call practical Dharma. Why I think our practice should be user friendly and not a test of endurance. And what makes this practice, or what can make this practice, a test of endurance. So I want to share with you some thoughts on that. As you probably figured out by now, if you've been attending regularly, I'm not a fan of rigidity and surety in any context, much less on this path. Nor am I a fan of orthodoxy, about which I'll say more in a moment, whether in faith traditions, in psychology, in politics, in any aspect of life. And my reasoning for that is very simple. Rigid adherence to a belief system, clinging to it, is almost without exception a source of suffering, especially when the world is not aligned with our rigid orthodox beliefs, if that's what we're clinging to, or if we fall short of those rigid standards in our efforts in our day-to-day lives. I don't believe in any way, in any context, there is a one truth with a capital T, whatever the belief system. While a certain level, and certainly you know this, of shared beliefs and principles provide a foundation for community, excessive orthodoxy results in rigidity, intolerance, exclusivity, and stagnation, in my view. And one major drawback of orthodoxy, among many, is that it discourages critical thinking and questioning. It reinforces groupthink. It promotes othering of those who disagree. Orthodoxy suppresses dissent and silences diverse voices within a community. I mean, just think about the wide range of opinions that get shared here twice a week during our discussions. In addition, orthodoxy breeds intolerance towards those who hold different beliefs or lifestyles. In fact, orthodoxy can foster a sense of superiority, a sense of self-righteousness, which can lead to the dehumanization or othering of those who aren't within our belief system, something we see all the time in fundamentalist faith traditions. When a belief system demands unwavering adherence to a set of doctrines, we are discouraged rather, discouraged from challenging these ideas or exploring alternative perspectives. It is antithetical to the freedom that we seek on this path. Orthodoxy is antithetical to the freedom we seek. I know people who are devout in their faith tradition but still suffer greatly because their faith tradition offers little that is practical to relieve their suffering. It's all about platitudes, vows, creeds, prayers, and so forth. In addition, because they often blame themselves for their suffering because they feel they are inadequate in meeting the standards of purity put forth by their belief system. As I mentioned here in the past, despite my father being a minister, I left the church early in my teens because I was put off by the expectation that I should accept things and recite a creed attesting to those things just because somebody told me to. I believe strongly in individual freedom and choice and taking responsibility for our own actions rather than blindly following what someone else tells us to do or tells us to believe. Not that I'm advocating lawlessness, unwholesomeness, or harmful choices or doing whatever feels good. No, a major part of being responsible for ourselves is a strong moral and ethical foundation that's imbued with compassion, loving kindness, and the greater good. But I'm also a pragmatist. I want to know what works rather than some pie in the sky promises. So back to Emily's email to me. I initially responded by assuring her that I too am bothered by flying insects and other distractions, such as being too hot or too cold when meditating, even on long retreats when I'm very quiet and centered. I indicated that I have not yet developed the equanimity to not be bothered by such distractions, and nor do I strive to achieve that type of sort of gutted out equanimity. I bristle at the admonition by some teachers to not move during meditation, even if I'm in pain or my limb goes to sleep, as if that is a measure somehow of how deep and advanced my practice is or how it will help my spiritual progress. I just don't buy it. I never give that instruction when leading meditation, as I think trying to simply be with the pain or the discomfort can become too great a distraction in getting quiet and centered and as centered as possible. It's not a situation where I think practicing acceptance should override our degree of comfort. There's no point in unnecessary, avoidable suffering. So you can see where I'm going with this. Of course, my position is heresy in Orthodox circles, which is why I call what I teach and practice practical Dharma. I'm more interested, both in myself and for you and others that I teach, in the outcome of reduced suffering rather than the purity of the process of getting there. Again, more interested in the outcome of reduced suffering rather than the purity of the process. Admittedly, this is a function of my many years as a psychologist and being open to meet my clients where they were. In other words, meeting them with whatever I could bring, which had the greatest potential to lessen their suffering. When I was a young beginning psychologist with the hubris of youth, I thought I knew everything there was about the right way to do psychotherapy, but it did not take me long in my psychotherapy practice to realize how naive and wrong I was. And I quickly had to stop trying to put people in a box with a label on it in which one approach to treatment fits all. The Buddha was not rigid in his teachings because he cared about the outcome, less so the process. Remember that he instructed his followers not to take his word for anything that he taught. Rather, he told them to try it out and see if it worked for them. I have little patience with teachers who cling so rigidly to the teachings as if there's only one way to follow the Buddha or only one final interpretation of his teachings. I mean, over 2,600 years, his teachings went in lots of different directions. There is not one true Dharma. You know, I recently got kicked off an online Buddhist forum for pushing back on this issue. The moderator of the forum was of the There Is Only One True Path school, and I had suggesting that clinging tightly to a single rigid view of the Dharma was not skillful and would inevitably lead to greater suffering, not less suffering. The Buddha gifted us with a wonderful roadmap to reduce our suffering and to achieve greater joy in our lives. But it is just that, a roadmap, which allows us for stops along the way, side trips, taking in different sites, a non-direct line from point A to point B. His teachings are not a rigid one-size-fits-all approach to reducing suffering, a strategy which I think causes more suffering when we fall short of an orthodox view. And it plays into our cultural standard that if you're suffering, you're not trying hard enough, you're not praying hard enough, you're not otherwise following this prescribed script for a true happiness. It's why I ask you to try what I offer here twice a week. Don't take it as gospel. If it resonates with your experience, make it part of your practice. If it speaks to you, start using it. If it does not, move on to something else. As what is important with practical Dharma is the emphasis on practical. My goal is to have us all suffer less, not meet some purity goal with the regard to the Dharma. So that's why I teach practical Dharma. So let's get your thoughts on